Welcome back, ladies and gents. Happy Thursday. What a wonderful week it has been for not just the cryptocurrency markets, but the markets at large. And today, things might be about to get even better. We have already had confirmation that the BOE, the Bank of England, have lowered their interest rates. And later on today, this evening, depending on where you are, the Federal Reserve are likely going to do the same thing. And ultimately, when central banks lower their interest rates, it weakens their currency in regards to taking that demand out from under it. And ultimately, when you look at markets broadly, they've just become a short currency trade. And in fact, that's the entire reason for Bitcoin's existence. It was meant to, or was introduced to us to sort of hedge our bets in regards to the fiat systems and provide us with an alternative. And it's been nothing short of a spectacular success since then, which does sort of leave me to be a little bit conspiratorial. However, that's for an entirely different video. So we've got some unbelievable news to go over with you. We'll be starting off on, of course, what central banks are doing. Recapping on Bitcoin, there's a number of technical targets that have given us confluence in regards to the direction Bitcoin was going to go in. And we said, even going into this election, regardless of the outcome, the inevitability in regards to the proliferation of the fiat systems was going to be the case. And one individual, being Trump, who's now won, was going to be more bullish for the markets than the other. Of course, he's won, and we saw the market's excitement over that. And on the topic of excitement, we saw the biggest day ever in regards to inflows or volume for the US Bitcoin ETFs. US Bitcoin ETFs, by the way, have over 1 million Bitcoin in them. Now, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. What's the actual liquid supply of Bitcoin in regards to what people could get their hands on? Exchanges have had them drained, and actually people, and we saw this from Coinbase's report, are choosing the ETFs with more of a familiar kind of face, if you will, a familiar institutional face than the likes of Coinbase. And that's why their revenues were down 18%. But Coinbase, of course, did very well on the back end of all this. So we are going to be looking at some of the inflows. We're going to be talking, obviously, about Gary Gensler. And there is news floating around. We have Senator Cynthia Lummis saying and tweeting, we are going to build a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I believe there's a great opportunity in the markets right now that you guys can capital off. We spoke about many Bitcoin miners publicly, whether that's TeraWulf, one that many of my community were buying in the $1 to $2 range, or whether it's any of the others. We have one miner in, they all look the same, by the way, but we have one that we think is still going to do spectacular. From when we've sort of been accumulating it, it was near enough a 30x. That's altcoin-like returns for a stock, and mining is going to become a matter of national security as we sort of Bitcoinize everything. Obviously, MicroStrategy doing very well. And then we're going to be talking about the infamous Benjamin Cowen. He's kind of become, I guess, the adversary to altcoins in many regards. However, what he said this morning I think was interesting, certainly given how right he's been on Bitcoin dominance generally. You know, you have to give it to the guy, even though we were probably one of the only people that were actually looking at Bitcoin at 16K. And I took my entire community and said, look, I think now's the time to start buying Bitcoin on the 5th of January 2023, or crypto, I should say, not Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is a part of that. I largely got the Bitcoin dominance trade wrong. You know, we could have been in Bitcoin from then till now. We wouldn't have had to go through the chop that we're going through for altcoins. And then I could have pivoted us all back in. That's a mistake I've made. You live and learn. There's no point crying over spilt milk, as we say here in the UK. I'm obviously not in the UK at the moment. We've been traveling around Europe. It really does make you sort of appreciate what a dump the UK actually is. But enough on that. So we've got a lot to get into. Let's get into it all. And let's start things off with some sort of financial news that is taking place today. European markets trade higher as Trump wins or win settles in. You can see the market's reaction. You know what they think. And actually, we thought he was the most probable outcome based on how the markets were positioned. And it wasn't just us. Actually, later on, Stan Druckenmiller himself came out and said a similar thing. He said, if you look at those unregulated markets, they're positioned for Trump victory because he's likely going to be more friendly towards them. Of course, that is the case. But today, we've had the Bank of England rate cut. And we're also very likely this evening to get the Fed doing the same thing. That's ultimately going to weaken currencies because it takes the demand out from underneath them due to the burden on that debt, the interest on that debt being lowered. So there's not that much, or there's less needed to actually pay off that debt. Markets generally have just become a short currency trade in a proliferation system. We've always said the Nikkei is a short yen trade because the yen is very much a basket case in regards to a currency. But this is sort of macro news. We've got that macro sort of story that we're very much getting confirmation of, that we've been sticking to, that is ultimately coming to fruition. And this is just another monumental step in that right direction. Let's talk about the Bitcoin charts before we get into some other news. We've continued to highlight a number of technical patterns that give us confluence in regards to Bitcoin's direction. In fact, there was one on the smaller time frame that took us to 84K, and we looked at this pattern here. You can see this symmetrical triangle going into FOMC when they did a 50. And we said, actually, the market's likely going to do well out of this. It wasn't just the likes of Bitcoin that had that target. Those of you that watch me regularly will remember. It was the likes of the SPY. You can see how this is very much shooting up. The US 100, NVIDIA, of course, MicroStrategy is very nearly at our target. And there was a number of stocks out there. Tesla now coming to fruition. This is a taking of this sort of key level of significance that sees you run to 505 on momentum. But Bitcoin had this pattern also. And this is a small pattern that agrees with the broader direction of the macro patterns that we have, ultimately taking Bitcoin to the upside. And we'll talk about altcoins in just a second and related to Benjamin Cowen's tweet. He's a good guy to follow, actually, to be fair. You know, I can't say anything bad about the guy at all. I know on Twitter he gets a lot of flack, certainly from altcoin communities. But when somebody's right, I mean, what are you angry with them for? You know, that's kind of my stance on it. And he's been very right. And you always have to give credit where it's due on certainly Bitcoin dominance. But what he says is interesting, and we're going to get into that towards the end of the video. But there's a number of patterns that give us technical confluence. Ultimately, we think you're going to get there. Where do I think Bitcoin's going to go this cycle? I don't really know. But we have patterns for 130, 150, 1,000, and then potentially 309 in much the same way, this sort of cup and handle that we were calling for SV. Let's put Vanex Semiconductors in. To get to its target of 311 from, you know, a similar place to where Bitcoin was. And this is all ultimately coming to fruition. And it doesn't matter what bull market it is, there's always going to be a fundamental narrative. And this one is going to be Trump, largely. And actually, we think Bitcoin miners are going to do amazing. It's worth just becoming a Patreon just to unlock that miner. If the group's not for you, it's not for you, but it's an amazing community. And we do meetings regularly. In fact, I did an ad hoc one from here in the Balkans last night. So there's great ramifications in regards to everything that's going on. One is, of course, Gary Gensler getting fired. He is out of there. Of course, we still need to, I think the handover is January for the Trump presidency. But there's going to be things going on behind the scene as we speak. Trump is out of here, or Gary Gensler's out of here, guys. And that's ultimately a really bullish thing for the industry because he just stifled it. And a bullish thing for the altcoin sector more broadly. We'll do a video on XRP later tonight, perhaps having a grill, just sharing some thoughts with you guys. But this has great ramifications on the space as a whole. This space is now going to be essentially propagated and pushed to where it should have been if he wasn't sort of waging this war upon the industry. Fruitlessly, in fact, at the cost of the American taxpayer and American cryptocurrency investor. This is from Senator Cynthia Lummis, somebody that's been very vocal in regards to the cryptocurrency space. She's essentially highlighting here, we're going to build a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The US government is one of the largest Bitcoin holders already because of the confiscation of things like Silk Road's Bitcoin, et cetera, This is going to happen. And if you have the US government, all the largest institutions, particularly within the world, certainly America, some of the companies, remember Microsoft are voting on the 10th, a couple of days, to the 10th of December. The boards advise them not to do this, to add Bitcoin to their reserves. If you have all these companies within America and large institutions holding Bitcoin, well, Bitcoin becomes a matter of national security. And you're going to see almost like a nationalization of mining, in my opinion. And even though we're late on the Bitcoin trade, we think actually we've got miners that will outperform Bitcoin rather significantly. We're actually going to a Bitcoin conference. One of the speakers actually commenting here towards the end of this week. I'm very much looking forward to that. And on some amazing news, and we've seen a continued accumulation by institutions broadly, continued crypto exchange reserves get drawn off. And we've also seen the likes of whale accounts continue to sort of hoard Bitcoin. Yesterday, within the first 20 minutes of the market opening, we saw $1 billion of volume in IBIT, one of the Bitcoin ETFs alone. And to finish the day, they did $4.1 billion. For context, that's more volume than stocks like Berkshire Hathaway, Netflix, or Visa saw today. It was only up 10%. Its second best day since the launch. Some of this will convert it into inflows, likely hitting Tuesday, Wednesday night. Wow. And you're seeing those inflows in the form of Bitcoin's price. And the altcoin market, I've got altcoins like Fetch AI that are up 30-40% since his victory was announced. And on the topic of altcoins, I want to come to Benjamin Cohen's tweet here. He is tweeting, excluding stablecoins, Bitcoin dominance has tagged the upper part of this wedge, likely a rising wedge, at 65%, which corresponds to 60% including stablecoins. BTC dominance has gone high enough for me, as my targets have always been 60% including stablecoins and 65% excluding stablecoins. Still a chance dominant goes slightly higher before end of year, but I think it makes sense to start planning for things to turn around in 2025. That means altcoins, ladies and gentlemen, are going to start to shine. The time is upon us. This is such a monumental week for the industry. It's a really pivotal point. It's a turning point for the industry at large, and it's a turning point for us as crypto investors. We now have essentially a very friendly and accommodative president within the United States. UK obviously not, well, we don't know what really their stance is on crypto, but certainly they're not very sort of accommodative to entrepreneurs and hardworking people, and even working class people we saw with a budget. But that is really it for me, guys. Everything that we've spoken about is coming to fruition. And when you look at the altcoin market, with BTC dominance rolling, with BTC dominance going up, that's likely going to see altcoins overperform in much the same manner they've overperformed to the downside. It's an amazing time to be in the space, guys. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Thanks a lot, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all in tomorrow's Daily Market Update. Thanks for watching, guys. See you tomorrow.